Guys, welcome. It is currently 5:08 p.m. where I am, 7:08 p.m. where Mr. Dave is. This is Dave from Sentinels. This is going to be the second Under the Skin session. Now, funny thing, I did not do my homework because evidently the man himself has done a very, very similar session to this for the Six Strokes podcast, in which he did track by track lyrical analysis for him and his band Sentinels, their latest album that came out earlier this year, Collapse by Design. Basically, we're going to be doing the same thing here. We are going to be digging under the skin lyrically of this whole album, go over the major concepts of it, and go track by track as much as possible with the time frame that we currently have. Mr. Dave, how are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm great, man. Thank you. Thank you for having me. How
Of
are you?
course, man. I'm not doing too bad. Moving from Arizona to Tennessee, though, seems to become more challenging every day. Getting everything packed up and getting ready to jump 4 states over. It's a big choice. It's a big step in my life. So, but that's about it. Otherwise, not doing too bad. Just got off of work, ready for the rest of the night, and ready to dig under the skin of Collapse by Design. I love the album art. I had a few snippets here and there. I got to listen to a little bit of the album with the premiere track, really, and the snippet of the premiere track when you guys were first marketing and promoting this record. Um, really interesting stuff. Very genty, very modernized. Definitely something that allows it to make sense for you guys to be opening on the Angel or Alien tour earlier this year with Shadow of Intent and Signs of the Swarm. Shout out to David from Signs of the Swarm. He's a homie, and we've had him on the channel a couple times as well. But kind of jumping into it as soon as possible, really. Collapse by Design, this is you guys' debut album, correct?
Yeah. First debut, like official full length record.
Sweet. And I can only imagine you guys had a lot of fun. There were a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that went into this record. And really, other than lyrical analysis, we also want to tell as much of the story behind this record as possible. Which I mean, that comes with the lyrics as well. But even the fun stories behind the scenes of the music videos, anything you're willing to share upon that, and we will go ahead and dive into that as we progress along. But Dave, my good friend, what can you tell us about Collapse by Design into like kind of a general summary, kind of like the back of the book for this album?
Collapse by Design. While I don't want to say it's a concept record, it's definitely a themed record. It lyrically takes place all from like my perspective, and it kind of goes over, my point of view over the past 10 to 15 years of my life, and all the different relationships, whether that be like romantic, family, or like friend type relationships
Yes.
that have kind of either gone wrong in some way or have left me with some sort of heartache or some sort of, I guess for lack of better words, trauma. And it's just a lot of stuff that I kept inside and really only, disclosed to like a few people throughout my life, like close friends, but never really, put the pen to paper,
Right.
uh, and kind of vented all this stuff out. And when we were in the studio recording this album, we had we had just started tracking, and we unfortunately had to part with our previous vocalist. And he at the time didn't have many lyrics written, and he kind of enlisted in me to help him with some of the songs, like in lyrically speaking.
Right.
And so when we had to part ways, which was a mutual thing, by the way,
Good.
um, we I presented to my producer, what I had started writing, like, and I gave him like the patterns and stuff like that I came up with, and he said, I think that you're doing a great job with this, and I think while you're searching for another vocalist, you should be the one handling the lyrical duties because I believe that you can do this.
Right.
So yeah, it was a huge task, something that I'd never been tasked with before. So not only did I have to learn drums or like perfectly learned drums for 12 songs to track, I had to now write for 11 of them because one
Right.
of them is an instrumental. So I was like, holy shit, like I really have my work cut out for me right now.
Yeah.
Uh, but it was definitely a very mentally and emotionally positive experience for me, and it was very healing to let all this stuff out that I had been like holding on to or for all these years.
Right.
So yeah, it's something I'm very grateful for, and it just makes me even closer and more passionate about this album.
Right. And I was about to ask the question really because I didn't add that little detail in for whatever reason. But guys, this Dave is the drummer as well as currently, right, the vocalist, the primary vocalist. You guys didn't have an add-in on tour or anything like that, or
Oh no, I'm not the main vocalist. I'm just the drummer, and I do background vocals.
background
We
vocals.
have found a vocalist since, and he's the main vocalist that you hear on the record.
Okay, sick.
I'm sprinkled in there a little bit.
Right. Okay. And I mean that's also really cool because speaking for a lot of just speaking from a perspective of a music enthusiast and like someone who loves bands like While She Sleeps, Wage War, Era, Upon a Burning Body, even it's always really cool to have that extra voice in there, and not just speaking for a voice, but another perspective, another being kind of providing emotion. So that's really cool to know that you were the kind of the mind child behind most of the lyrics on this record, backup vocals and drumming. Like I know right now I have maybe 60 plus songs written, and even that's kind of hard to like push forward and be like, okay, so how are we putting the guitar or the drum or the bass or even backup vocals behind this? It's been a real interesting process, and yeah, to say the least, we're not talking about me. We're talking about this record. So first track on the record. What do we got? What do we got lyrically going on? Take it away, my good sir.
The first track on the record is called Epitaph, and so we had the intent of writing like an intro track for the record, kind of short, sweet, and to the point. And a lot of people when they put an intro song on the record, they like to say that or they believe that the first song is supposed to set the tone for the entire album and like kind of what you're gonna get into. But in this case, it's not exactly that. Epitaph is kind of like just a short, sweet, like heavy, like punch you in the face, like right out of the gate song. It's definitely I guess not intentionally, but like it has very much taken the shape of kind of like an opening like mosh song in a sense.
Right,
Not that we just strived to write something that would just get people moving, but like we just wanted something that would like grab you by the throat right out of the gate.
right,
And so being that the song is mostly aggressive and it really does make you like feel like you're in like the middle of a mosh pit at a high energy show.
right.
So where that took me, like, and this is something that I did with approaching every song, was I didn't write anything before the music was there. Like the music was all written and then I wrote. So I let the music
Ooh,
take me to a certain energy or a certain mood. And so I kind of took myself to that mindset of like being at a show, being pissed off and venting out and letting out that energy. And so lyrically, this is a very pissed off track, and it's really a track of retaliation in a sense.
right.
So this is like one of like several songs on this record where the person that I'm kind of speaking to was somebody that I used to be in a relationship with, where I was unfortunately on the receiving end of a lot of toxic behavior.
Yes.
And, I, it really, that relationship really made me constantly look at myself different. I was always questioning if I was the type of man that I think I am, and made me feel like, it made me question myself. I'm like, am I really the good guy that I think I am? Because from what she's saying, I must not be like trustworthy or worthy of love or anything. So it really
Yeah.
made me doubt myself and make me feel like nothing. So, this was like the angry side of my feelings in that relationship. So, you know, this song, like lyrically, basically says it's kind of lashing back and basically telling the person, it's like, look deep behind my eyes and see the pain that you've caused me, and realize that this is all done by your hand. Like
Right.
this was all your doing. And to be honest, I'm not that happy about it.
Right.
So here's what I think of you.
Yeah.
And it's basically kind of flipping like the mirror on them and making them look at themselves and realize what's wrong with them and why they decide to, instead of get help for themselves and, find self-love, they decide to destroy the people that are closest to them.
Right.
So it's like kind of as if I'm the monster that they're saying I am, and I'm almost, you know, flipping it on them, and I'm saying, well, why don't you realize the monster that you are?
Yeah.
And like the one line in the song says, I'm trying to recall exactly like the starting point. I
Right.
apologize.
No, you're
Uh,
fine.
says, you know, just another broken soul bent on burying all that remains, all in disdain, because it's all you know. Ooh, excuse me.
All good. You're good.
Because it's all you know, but I'm here to devastate, which means like
Oh shit.
you may have made me feel this way, but I'm going to turn it up to 11 for you.
Right. Exactly.
Because
Because
like in that moment and in that anger, that's what I felt that that person deserved.
yeah, and I mean, there are a great many people personally in my life. I have to say I'm kind of gullible. I'm very gullible and not very smart when it comes to dating people. Like no names obviously because we don't do that on the channel. Um but I have had the worst luck in people. Like legitimately people who have done some dark and dirty shit just to make me feel bad about breaking up with them, but that's
Mhm.
as far as I'll go with the details. It was just not cool, and I was an idiot. So, um, and like just being around the wrong people and convincing yourself over time that you're the bad guy is like the worst thing in the world because you're like, yo, I thought we were together because you thought I was trustworthy and you thought I was lovable and all this shit, and then, well, quite evidently, they paint this very, very blood-stained picture that you are not lovable, you are not trustworthy. So very, very emotional, very personal, something I can personally relate to right off the bat. So that's a pretty good start. It's a pretty
Yeah.
good start to quite the record, and love the album cover, among other things. Love
Thank
the little sigil that you guys ended up cooking up for this record. So next track we have Inertia. And going on to Spotify and stuff, I'm also noticing that Inertia seemed to be like one of the first was that like one of the first opening singles for you guys promoting this record?
Yeah, that was the first single that we dropped.
Okay.
Announce our signing, announce our new vocalist, and
Sick.
basically just come out of the gate with a ridiculously heavy and spastic song to get people's attention.
Right, of course. And also, I just remembered this and I want to point this out. For those on my channel who are a fan of Signs of the Swarm and Pernicious, this dude, this dude right here was the puppet on the chains, right?
That
Yeah.
was me.
This dude is the puppet on the chains. Such a killer song, and it was like awesome to see a like a pretty significant member of a band. Not that all the others aren't, but Dave. We hear a lot about Dave when we think Sentinels, or at least I do now. But just to point that out. But diving into Inertia, what do we got going on here? Because I know there was the music video for it that was really really just like smack you in the face back and forth with the chancla type of energy. And I remember seeing the little clips of the video that I did, and I'm like, holy shit! Like this is a Djent band, but it should definitely be like honored and memorized by the deathcore community and stuff. Because like it's just like so hard, it just smacks you in the face. What can you tell me about this song?
Inertia would, well, first of all, thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Of course.
Uh, Inertia is, you know, just like the song instrumentally, it's very spastic
Mm.
and, all over the place. A lot of different, you know, dissonant leads. eerie ambience and like pummeling drums with like a little dose of like melody in there. So like this song is very all over the place instrumentally, and just like that lyrically, it's the same. It's the same kind of approach. And this song took me to a time where, you know, myself and somebody else that I was close with um, was, you know, feeling insanely depressed and actually, idealizing suicide.
Mm.
And so this song takes you into the mindset of somebody struggling with suicidal thoughts, but it's not just a one-track thing of just talking about wanting to die and wanting to end your life. It's all the different the thought processes that come with it, where, you know, you're thinking that ending your own life will be it'll end the pain. It'll end, the feeling of just
Sorry.
this, this nothingness. And, but then also it discusses, kind of, it's kind of hidden in there. It's not very obvious, but
Right.
the like the discussion of bringing it up to somebody and confiding in somebody that you're dealing with these thoughts and wanting to take your life, and then the person that you're confiding in decides to take the approach of telling you that suicide is a selfish notion and that you're selfish for thinking that they're not really there for you.
Mm.
And it kind of then goes into the aspect of feeling like, well, if I, take my life, I'm disappointing others, but then by me staying here, I'm still unhappy. And so the title Inertia, like inertia is like the inability to move
Right.
or
Stalemate.
to, yeah, like stalemate. So like that's where the title comes from, is like where you're stuck in between like this decision, and you don't know what to do, because either one, you're making somebody unhappy. Like if you take your life, you're making your loved ones and everyone who cares about you unhappy. But then by staying here, you're also unhappy. So
Yeah.
you're unable to make a decision. And then all these different thought processes come with it. And then, it ultimately like ends up in you know, making the choice of sticking around, but also kind of sticking it to the person that told you that you were selfish. And
Yeah.
they're like the last few lines of the song are, um, pray for a soul to keep while I beg for inner peace. So that's like saying you can pray for me all you want, but I'm begging, literally for inner peace.
Yeah.
Like you can pray all you want, but it's not helping me. And selfishness has stripped me, or selfishness has stripped from me the gift of eternal sleep. And so that's kind of saying like, you're calling me selfish for wanting to take my own life, but it's selfish of you to make the decision for me,
Yeah.
or, or try to convince me otherwise.
Right.
Uh, and by saying all this, just a note to the listeners, I'm not condoning suicide. I'm not, condoning or encouraging anyone to take that route, because yes, like suicide is a very sensitive subject. It's a very dark subject. And, I'm very familiar with it myself. I came close to a couple suicidal attempts in my life
Mm.
when I was at my darkest points. So I'm just trying to really shed light on here, the different sides of somebody's mind when they're going through this stuff, because
Yeah.
it's not just one track, and it's not just a selfish notion or a selfish thought. It's a real serious issue, and a lot of people, will kind of brush it off because it seems a lot more common nowadays. But I feel like the more commonly discussed it is, I feel like sometimes people take it less serious,
Yeah.
because they're like, oh, who doesn't have suicidal thoughts nowadays? Ugh. Or like they brush it off, like, where they're
Yeah.
just like, oh, you're being dramatic. It's like, no, like you got to take that shit seriously,
Mm.
and, be there for the person instead, and, make them feel that they're loved, and they have worth, and that,
Yeah.
yes, by leaving this earth, like they will leave a gigantic hole in your heart.
Mm.
And It's not just to say that, it's only because of my pain, but you got to remember that, they're a person too, and they should be treated like one, and they need to be made known that, their life matters.
Yes, definitely. And that is a very, very powerful song. I love the message behind that. And that's exactly why we do these sessions, people, is because it's really cool to dig under the records that have this much emotional depth. It's really, really important to me. And I sure as hell think it is important to you guys because you guys seem to like the first episode. So that's why we're going to continue doing this. That and it's fun. It's really, really fun. So I do appreciate you sharing the lyrical dive on Inertia with us. Moving right along, in which real quick, I completely agree with Dave. Suicide is a very serious thing. I have loved ones and very close friends who deal with that on a regularly daily basis, and I will admit that at a point in time, because everybody was joking about it, I thought that other people weren't taking it seriously, so I would take serious action against that, and I'd be like, hey, you can't joke about that. People are suicidal, people are depressed, and it sucks, so don't joke about it. And I would get really mad at people for that. But then I realized over time that people were more or less just trying to like want to kill myself over a test, like haha, and like a lot of them were actually seriously stressed and depressed and stuff like that. So definitely very, very serious stuff. Um, Third track on Collapse by Design, in which so much to unpack already. Really, really emotional stuff, but I love that. We have Comfort in Familiar Pain. I have a feeling, just like right off the bat, that this has some depth behind it as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I will say this is probably one I can't speak on as closely
Right.
because for two reasons is one, uh this is the only song that I didn't write the lyrics in full to.
Oh.
This was assisted by our assistant engineer on the record. His name's Aaron Shiparian, and he's been
Oh
basically like
shit.
the sixth member of Sentinels, like since we were starting, because he's always been there for input. He's worked on every single one of our records since the very beginning, since long before I was in the band. Um, and he's just got a great ear for everything in metal, and he's great at producing lyrics, vocal patterns, and due to the very progressive and technical nature of this song, I had a very hard time trying to find the flow for vocals originally.
Yes.
So, and I was already trying to tackle the rest of this album, and I was like, hey man, while I'm working on these, do you think you could try to come up with something? Here's what I want to talk about, let me know what comes to mind. And he was fully on board, and he helped me out. And within like a week or so, he had almost the full song laid out. And so once he sent me like the demo of like the vocal patterns and the lyrics, I really dug the patterns. There were maybe a couple lyrics in there I wasn't too big on. So, I asked him if it was cool if like I switched them out now that we had the
Hmm.
flow, and we kind of like tag team like that for the most part. So he got like the ball rolling, and like once it was like established like what the flow is going to be, um, I kind of took over and just like revised from there, and then finished off the lyrics at the end, and then some in between. But Comfort and Familiar Pain, the objective of this song was to cover the topic of uh, basically when somebody is in abusive or toxic relationships, and when they get out of it, they feel that that's all that they deserve is an unhealthy, unstable relationship, and they find comfort in
A
that familiar.
familiar pain. Wow.
So like the title just sums it up perfectly. And I've seen a lot of, members of my family, like, their marriages end in divorce because, their relationships were very much like that. And, after those relationships ended, they always questioned their self-worth, and
Right.
they didn't know if they were good enough to receive love because that the person on the other end, like, always just made them feel like everything they did was wrong, or, that they were just unlovable. And that always killed me to see. And I've had plenty of friends, a lot of girlfriends of mine, feel that way. And it's tough. It's a tough subject. And even though it's not something I'm close with, subject wise, I've seen it all around me, like all my life. And so, it goes back and forth between the feeling of being free and finally like feeling that self-worth and that self-love, which is where that like the lyric this is serenity comes from. And then it kind of goes back into like the feeling of just feeling restless and like, you know, that this it's just a never-ending cycle.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there is one passage in the song that I think perfectly encapsulates like both sides. And it says, "I've been destined a lifetime of suffering. I'm preset to misery eternally. I recognize this mental affliction, but I fail to surrender." So it covers both sides of that, where like you just feel like you're stuck in this misery, but you recognize that this is a problem that you need to overcome and you're not going to give up.
Yeah, and that's always good. Is just making sure that even in the toughest and darkest of places mentally for you, for everybody watching and listening, that you try to find a very healthy way with your loved ones, surrounded by your loved ones, to get out of any dark spot that you're in. That's the most important part. I mean, hell, I know all about that type of stuff. Just speaking for mental health, with anxiety and stuff, anxiety and depression. Um, there's always a way out. There's always a way out, and just make sure that you're surrounding yourself with your loved ones. And I do love indeed that comfort and familiar pain seems to intertwine with the general theme of Epitaph. Like that's really cool. And yeah, I love continuity. Who doesn't like continuity in a good story? Moving right along, we have Embers. What can you tell me about that?
So Embers, this is the lead single off the record. And funny enough, it was the last single that come out on the day that the full album came out.
Oh,
We
is
had
it?
we had kind of talked about releasing it like as like the main song like when the album pre-orders went up, but then we kind of changed plans a little bit. But the song is doing basically exactly what it was meant to do, and that was to be like, the most like popular song on the record. And I'm glad that people are enjoying it. It really means a lot because it's one of my favorite songs on the record, favorite lyrically, and honestly the most personal and vulnerable one. We put out a music video at that one, directed by Chris Klump, and it actually stars Chris Polgarin, the bassist of Currents, who's one of our best
Okay.
friends. The whole band are basically our band best friend for sure. And so he was cool enough to star in the music video. And we got to work with fire in that one, which is something I've always wanted to do, but I wanted to approach it in a way where it wasn't going to be like, super corny. Some
Right.
people may think it is corny, but whatever.
Yeah.
The video came out sick to me. It's my favorite music video that we've ever done. And in the music video, you see, the character struggling with something, and you just kind of see him driving aimlessly, and you don't know where he's going or what he's doing. And he pulls up to an abandoned building, and before he enters the building, he grabs a gas can, and you are thinking to yourself, you're like, oh man, what is this guy gonna do? Like, is he gonna burn this place down or what? And then he enters the building, and you just see a chair there, like in some ominous lighting, and kind of sitting there debating with himself a little bit. He, starts to gas up the place and then pours it on himself. And then right before the music video ends, you see him strike a match. And, it leaves off, with the unconclusive ending of did he do it or did he not? And so just like fire, the struggle in the song that's discussed is temptation, uh, lust, and it can even be looked at as addiction.
Yeah.
And this song, it's kind of hard to talk about, honestly, but it's something that I struggled with for a while, was, dealing with temptation, like when you're in a relationship, like someone that you care about, and then other people start to, other women or whatever start to throw you some attention, and
Yeah.
you like that attention, but you love the person you're with and you don't give in to that. But then the more it happens, it starts to build up, and like you start to feel like you're like emotionally cheating on the person that you're with.
Right.
And, and so I was obviously too afraid to tell, you know, the person I was with at the time,
Right.
because I didn't want to crush her spirit and crush her heart and make her think that, she wasn't good enough for me or whatever. And it was just, I was also like mentally in a bad place at that time. So I was like suppressing all of these feelings and I was letting it build up inside of me. And so lyrically, the metaphor like for that temptation and that desire was, the fire.
Right.
And realizing that like once you let that fire grow and get big enough, it consumes everything and destroys everything that is important to you.
Right. And that's
So
that's really really important, people. Like temptation is a very very ugly thing, and yeah, like speaking for mental health issues, sometimes you're really tempted to do stupid things out of love or just out of self-loathing. Don't do it. I promise you, you have loved ones, and if you don't have people that, I guess if you don't have like friends that you feel that respect you, or you're just with bad people, that just means you got to move on to new people per se. Can't speak for everybody, of course, and like just kind of pinpoint those certain circumstances. But yeah, temptation is a very, very human and mortal thing. Just don't feed into it. That's called discipline when you
yeah,
don't feed into temptation.
yeah, and it's a very powerful desire. And like I don't consider myself a religious person at all, and we'll actually, talk about that on one of the later songs. Um, but it's the only thing that I've ever done that I've actually felt guilty about, or I've felt like a sinner about, even though I don't really like to use
Right.
the term, because I mean we're all imperfect, we're all sinners, I guess, by definition.
Yeah.
Uh, so that was the only thing that kind of made me feel like gross, and by like
By your
feel
own standards.
yeah, by my own standards, like feeling gross that I'm like even like giving into this. And I'm like, why would I give up like all this good for like some temporary satisfaction or whatever? And
Right.
it's something that was hard to put into words, and I never really anticipated talking about it in full, but I like to be honest and transparent and stuff. Like people can interpret their own thing about it. Like this song could very well be looked at as like a song about addiction, if anything,
Yes.
because it's got similar end results. But it was something that was very real in my life, and destroyed a very good relationship in my life, and I felt like it was appropriate for the song because it's very eerie, but then it's melodic, but in a very sad tone. A lot of the melody on this record does have a very sad vibe. So I kind of just leaned into that and I was like, what made me feel this way? And then that's kind of what came to.
Right. Well, without a doubt, we do appreciate you deciding to share the lyrical depth without getting any legal stuff involved, because it's always cool to get that side of the story. And again, that's why we're here, is to kind of learn the story of these records, dig under the skin of them, and see if they bleed in the first place per se. Just like analogy or skin analogy, I guess,
For
um,
sure.
which is very important. Just shows how human and personal the record is. So I do appreciate you sharing with that with us, and I am definitely going to be checking out the music video for Embers here pretty soon, because that sounds pretty badass. Um, next track being Albatross. What do we got going on here, Dave?
Uh, Albatross is kind of a continuation of Embers, where it really tackles the guilt that came after um, that relationship ended, and it was like the guilt building off of like that secret and like those suppressed feelings that I was holding on to.
Right,
And again, just like the lyrics, or just like the music, the lyrics are a little all over the place where they touch on different things. This is a kind of a mess lyrically in a way.
yeah,
And I don't mean to say like it's like it was just thrown together, but it covers a lot of different things. Whereas, you know, there's topics of, the overall thing is, the guilt and the want to find an answer uh to to find an answer for getting out of this feeling and out of this pit of despair. But then it also talks about and discusses wanting to basically sever yourself from the ugly side of yourself that causes all this want and gives into this temptation and wants to give into all these like ugly behaviors. And so the super heavy parts, I leaned into like I went with like a more like fantasy approach because this is actually a true story. I like during this part of my life when I was dealing with this guilt, I was, kind of becoming like, an insomniac. I wasn't sleeping much because I was just up like with my thoughts, and
Yeah.
I was still working, I was still working a full-time job at that point. So I had to be there at a certain time. And so like showing up to work with no sleep, like for days, it started to make me like almost hallucinate a little bit.
Yeah.
And it was like I'd be walking down the halls at work and I would start to like think I was seeing things out of my peripherals or like things that weren't there.
Yeah.
And like I knew they weren't there. And I knew that something that it was that this guilt was eventually like forming into something much darker. So that kind of I don't want to say middle section, but like right before the middle section where it drops into that super slow, like halftime sludgy like breakdown where Josh busts out like the low guttural vocals. Uh, the lyrics like leading into that, it says, "With my contorted vision, I'm surrounded by my fears." That's the aspect of like this forming into like a mental illness that's causing you to see like hellish visions and just like it's like you're basically surrounded by the demons that you're harboring within yourself.
Right.
Uh, and then, later on in the more melodic sections, it goes over that like desperation to find an answer why it's like, why do I keep doing this to myself? Like allowing myself to end these perfectly good relationships for stupid reasons that are just not worth it whatsoever.
Yeah.
Like, why am I giving up all good in my life for, those temporary satisfactions?
Right.
So it
And
really is like a multifaceted like set of lyrics where it's just, it covers a lot of different things. Where, and then the one lyric in the song, it says, my desperation for an answer felt just like a blade to the heart, is like coming to that realization, being like, look, man, like you're the reason that these good things in your life are going away.
right.
It's not anyone else's fault. It's not anyone else's doing. It's all you. So it's like finding out the truth. The truth hurts. And like that was, kind of what was like killing me was just realizing that like I did this to myself.
Yeah.
I have to come to terms with that.
Yeah, and without a doubt, it's sometimes more painful to just kind of like it's more painful, but it's more easy. It's kind of like if you decide not to exercise or whatever, and you start gaining weight over time, which there's nothing wrong with that, but like you're not satisfied with that. It's like sometimes the more painful things in life come from doing things a lot easier, a lot less disciplined,
Mhm.
and that's very very important with the process of like really realizing that you're in a bad situation, you're in a bad environment, getting stressed, anxious, or depressed. And there you go, like you said yourself, it allows for lyrics in a song like that to be more applicable. You probably didn't even mean for it to be like that, but like it ended up being a lot more applicable to other people's situations, and just the process of realizing that you should probably not be doing certain things in life, and just like letting these things get authority over you, because
Ab-
it's never going to end. Unless if you take that power, you take that authority back and start making a change to kind of counteract that just absolute toxic, situation. But that's awesome. Embers to Albatross.
Albert,
Albatross. Yeah, there we go. Albatross. I'm never able to pronounce that correctly. That's been a thing my whole life.
all good.
Albatross. But
That's where it comes.
next track being Desecration parentheses Isolation. What do we got going on here? I have a feeling this is like realization and kind of just like trying to isolate and like kind of black out the outside world. But who knows? What do we got going on here?
It's actually, I mean, it does discuss isolation, and this song lyrically takes a peek into uh, a household where the the leader of the household is a very overzealous and very strict religious follower,
Right.
and they have, that person has a child, and that child, the firstborn child out of all, is the one to defy and uh, come to the realization that they don't believe the same thing as you know their parents that raised them to believe these sort of things. So this song like really covers, it's basically like an anthem for the black sheep of the family.
Right.
And that was me in my household. So I was, the firstborn of my two brothers. We were raised in a pretty strict household, and being that I was the firstborn, I was the one who had the most strict set of rules, during my childhood. And, like my parents, I went with them to church and stuff like that. And then eventually I kind of came to the realization that, I just didn't believe the same things that they did.
Yeah.
And I struggled with that. And it was a big fear of mine to tell my parents that I didn't believe in God or religion. And when I finally did muster up the strength to tell them, you know, I recall them saying, "We feel like we failed you as parents." So that made me in turn feel like a failure, like
Right.
because I didn't believe in the same creed that they did, that I was just a failure. And that really, made me feel isolated in my own home.
Mhm.
And, you know, that can really mess with a person when you start to feel like you're not worthy of your parents' love and whatnot. My parents and I are extremely close, and like they never actually did deem me unlovable or anything like that, but that was just how I felt. And,
Right.
so this song is more so for the people out there who have actually been like cast out of their own homes
Mhm.
because of something like this. So yeah, it was inspired by that, but this is more so from an extreme uh, version of that. It's from the perspective of people who actually have been like cast out because, you know, they just believe in different things.
Yeah.
And it's another two-sided thing where all the heavy parts are like the anger that's directed at the parents,
Mhm.
uh, and all the hypocrisies, that are in their words and how they use their religion to like oppress and speak a certain way about things and use their words to hurt or use their belief system to hurt others.
Right.
And then the melodic parts, which again sound incredibly sad, are is from the black sheep's perspective, where, whenever you look in the mirror, you just feel like a failure.
Yeah.
And you're just you're looking at yourself and thinking like, you know, all because of this. Now I resent myself because I'm not even worthy of my own parents' love. And that was something that I felt for a long time, before realizing that, according to them, I could never be unlovable to them. I'm always worthy of their love. But that was something I struggled with for a long time, growing up in a household like that with a very strong belief system.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, throughout my childhood and like up until recently, I kind of dealt with that same thing. And I have two younger siblings as well. I was always the big image to look up to. I was supposed to be the example, and therefore, when I was very little, the discipline was there. And then when I wasn't, and it was my younger siblings next, it wasn't really. Um, but among other things, religious elements involved as well. Uh, yeah, like as soon as I kind of steered away and jeered away from religion, mostly Western monotheism, to like kind of just really constrict it down, be specific. After I learned about all of the hypocrisy and like their crusades and stuff, I definitely steered away from that. And my folks were not really into it at first, but basically as soon as I got into Ostricher, which is like Viking culture, Viking religion,
Mhm.
they're like, okay, yeah, as long as you're not a Satanist. I'm like, well, I'm not too, but um, it was a whole thing, and it took a long time for my father to accept it. But I mean, bless his heart, he is doing his best, and that's really all that I can. That's really all that matters. He's not ever mean to me. He's never like gotten physical or like really bullied me about it. He just doesn't understand, and that's completely fine. So don't worry, pops. I got you. But moving in, like obviously, real quick too. That is a very tame example to kind of throw into the pot. And I am my heart and soul, my respect, my condolences goes out to everybody who has legitimately been kicked out of their house because of their religious beliefs. By no way am I trying to undermine that, because it is a thing, whether because of religious beliefs or I mean even like hairstyles, your sexuality, your sexual orientation, all that stuff. Like I know that happens all the time. It still does, and it's awful. But
Yeah.
just
That was
just to add,
like
like
kind of
provide disclaimer.
yeah, and that was actually part of it too. Is like I've known people who have come out as gay to their parents, and they're like, well, that ain't the Christian way, so see ya. Like,
Yeah,
go find someone else to love you. Like, because it's like they let their beliefs get in front of what's important, and important, or what should be most important to them is loving the people that they brought into this world.
agreed.
And when they're cast out like that, it's you know you kind of leave them wondering and like confused and like full of hatred and heartache for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, it's a very sad thing, and again, my heart and condolences goes out to all of those who are experiencing that this very moment, because I'm sure that's definitely still a thing. Um, moving on to Solitude, that's an interesting title track or blah, 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 track title. Got to flip it around for a second. Um, what do we got? What do we got going on here with Solitude?
So Solitude, I can actually keep short because this is an instrumental track.
Ah,
Um, this is a atmospheric and very ambient interlude track that we threw in there. It's like a full instrumental. You got everything: guitars, drums, bass, um, and then like a ton of ambience and atmosphere. And this was the kind of it was almost like a palate cleanser,
right.
where you're being thrown with all these heavy, dissonant, crazy riffs and pummeling drums. And we just wanted, we're big fans of ambient music as well, and that's why we try to meld so much of it into our music.
Right.
And we wanted it to be a song that grew. It didn't just like stay at this one like monotonous level the whole time. We wanted it to
Yes.
grow and graduate and become bigger. And the song title Solitude just comes from like there is um, a very overwhelming sense of like you know solitude, like in listening to the song. It's like you feel like when you're listening to it, if you close your eyes, like I personally, when I listen to it, I feel like I'm alone by myself, and I'm like kind of in my feels, I guess, and
Yeah.
like to like ponder whatever's on my mind at the moment. It just feels like a good like a loner track. And then the name Solitude comes from the line from Desecration Isolation. It says, cast out from a home and all I knew, left abandoned to live in pure solitude. So it's almost like the end of Desecration Isolation, like how that ends super sad. It's almost like it's throwing you further
Yeah.
into that soundscape and that the soundtrack to loneliness.
Right. Well, that's super cool. And a great man, a great musician, a great lyricist once said that when it comes to heavy music, obviously he was talking more about vocals. This was Jonathan Davis of Korn. He's like, it doesn't really work well when there's just screaming all the time. You got to bounce back and forth between singing and heavies. Same thing works for instrumentals. And sometimes you take that to a dramatic level and you decide, hey, why don't we go from heavy vocals and heavy instrumentals to very mellowed out emotional instrumentals? Like, and just have that isolated. I love me some intermission tracks. I love me some interlude tracks. Definitely allows you to take a pause. So all records need that. Hell, like if your record is 17 songs, but you have like three different interludes, I will still listen to that record all the way through. Like Silent Planet does that all the time, and they're one of my favorite bands. Period.
Yeah,
So
they do a phenomenal job at that. And they're one band that, I'm sure, has inspired us in one way or another over
Right.
time. Um, and I approached that the same way, where, you know, we really wanted to just build, like a mood for this song, and we wanted it to feel like it is a crucial part of this record, because it's not just slapped there just to have an interlude. It was intended to stay instrumental and be this, like, this gap between the two bridges of this record, where, like, if you break off both sides, like, it starts and ends like heavy, but it's like you need this, like, middle part to kind of transition you into the rest. And it was intentional for this song to sound like as full of sorrow as it does.
Right. And that's really important. It's really important to continue establishing that mood while it's also taking a break. So Solitude, we got a bit of a continuity, a bit of a second track, a sequel track after Desecration Isolation. Then we got Tyrant. When you think of the word tyrant, you think of just like this very, very mean, power hungry, abusive person or something like that, I guess. So what do we got going on with Tyrant?
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. This this song, very aggressive in nature, and once again, that's where the lyrics took me. Uh, for Meshuggah fans out there, this song is like kind of like an unintentional love letter to Meshuggah. There's a lot of Meshuggah style like riffs and chug patterns and odd rhythms and whatnot. Some modulations in there, and due to the aggressive nature of the song, to kind of sum it up short, because it's really not super in depth. Not to say it's on the nose either, but this song just kind of discusses, kind of being under somebody with a power trip, and
Yeah.
they're using their point of authority to oppress and use their power to hurt, and like kind of say, like, it's like my way or the highway. and,
Yeah.
and this song was kind of about somebody who, I was pretty close with, and, the band was close with. And then, one day we start to hear, from close sources that, this person is calling us a fake band, or calling us a fake genre, that we're not real, and that, like, we're all just a computerized band and all this shit. And,
Mm.
just using negative terms, basically the equivalent of like YouTube comments. And but at the time, it kind of pissed me off, because it was coming from somebody who, we loved and trusted. And, hearing that, like, when they're away from us, they have all these choice words to say. So it pissed
Ooh.
me off, and I needed some lyrics for this song. So I kind of just went head on, and it's basically another retaliation track. And
Right.
to kind of paint a picture, um, even though I'm personally not too offending to one who's into this sort of thing, I'm not really one for, the genres, like, where it involves like kings and queens and princes and princesses and all this stuff. But I try to put myself in the place of, like, a feeble townsperson, and they're being ruled by a tyrannic king,
Yeah.
and using that power to oppress those around and enforce things upon, the rest, that are just overall not good for the community. And it's kind of about lashing back at that person, and, eventually letting them know that their reign is very short-lived,
Right.
and they'll be dethroned in a very unsavory way.
Yeah, tyrants like that like I cannot believe this. I was watching the old like very very unrelated, but um Disney movie, old Disney movie, Robin Hood. Did not know that the little rabbit kid was saying death to tyrants at one point. I'm like, what the hell? How did that make it into a Disney movie? But I'm like, oh yeah, death
Very
to
different.
tyrants.
Yeah, that's awesome. I don't remember. I haven't seen that movie in forever. I'll have
Dude,
to go.
it was such a nostalgia trip watching it again because my roommate hadn't seen it, so we watched it. And the moment that that happened, everybody in the room was just laughing because we're all very anti-tyrant, kind of anti-capitalist, to be honest. We're more about socialism and barter and like all that, but that's a completely different subject. Don't want
Yeah.
to go too much into that. But death to tyrants. Quote of quote me 2021 death to tyrants. I don't give a shit what country comes after me for that as long as it's just me. um but awesome. I love that I kind of got the general theme of what was going on with that track. And with the previous tracks, I can kind of add context and correlation. So, again, gotta love continuity in the story. To Wither Away, that definitely sounds like perhaps regret or something. Like I'm just gonna like mess around with this in my head for the rest of the session, really. But To Wither Away, that definitely sounds like regret, though you're doing the right thing, maybe.
Um, to Wither Away is lyrically about, this is like the second of three tracks that base around that relationship I was telling you about that starts with Epitaph.
Right.
That being with that person and all the different traumas and stuff that came with it. So To Wither Away is essentially about, being told, and that you're untrustworthy, or you're you're not as good as you think you are, and just basically being constantly belittled. And when you're trying to show nothing but love, but you're deemed untrustworthy and unlovable, when you're already in quite a fragile state, and you start to look at yourself and question who you are, and you start to question if there's even anything good left in you because this person has convinced you otherwise. So it's literally about feeling like as if, not to use the overused like statement like that you hear a lot in words, like feeling like a shell of the person you once were. And you just feel like all the good parts of yourself have withered away.
Yeah.
And it also discusses like the events like leading up to that, where it's like I saw the signs that this was bad, but you know, I still took the path here because I felt that it was right, and I wanted to fix this person, and I wanted to show them otherwise, that, that they could be loved and stuff like that. But no matter how hard you showed them or how hard you tried, they just still decided to basically put
Sorry.
their no, put their abuse onto to you, and then make you eventually feel unlovable. And so it literally, the title sums it up perfectly. It's like the process of withering away of all the good parts of yourself, like just being laid to waste. And,
Yeah.
you know, just feeling as if like everything good in your life is gone, or every good feeling that you had is gone.
Yeah.
And uh, yeah, To Wither Away was actually the first song that I wrote lyrically for this album, and it was the one that kind of set the pace and set the tone for what the rest of the record was going to be about. And it actually was one of two songs that inspired the album cover, because on the cover you see this guy kind of like emerging from like a hellish sandstorm in the middle of like a wasteland, and it looks like he's fading away, like
Mm.
is there it's like he's like turning to dust, but it's actually him reforming from nothing. And I'll touch more on that on the song that fully, covers that. But that was the part that really inspired the artwork.
Sick.
And we put out a music video for this one as well that was also directed by Chris Klump. And pretty simplistic video style, a lot of just metaphorical imagery, flowers, like white roses in the beginning in full bloom. And then there's a character in the video played by my good friend Kayla O'Donnell, who basically played a character named Talona, who is the like goddess of decay and poison.
Ooh.
So there's a couple shots of Josh, our vocalist, where he's like deadpan vocalizing the words, and it's in like a slow-mo kind of effect that's like sunk up with, the tempo of the song. And when she gets closer to him, and like throughout the music video, the closer she gets to him, the more she interacts with him, like you see the flower start to die. She tries to take his sight, like tries to claw his eyes out. And there's like a shot of all of us in slow motion where you see like black rose petals like falling around us.
Oh shit.
uh yeah, so I think it was a pretty effective video for, the simplistic nature that we took. I'm
Yeah.
proud of it. I'm very stoked on it. It is another song that I hold close and dear to my heart. And it was like the first, like I said, it was the first song I wrote for the record, and it came very naturally because once I heard the demo that my guitar player Chris sent over,
Yeah.
it, the 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 chorus pattern instantly came to my mind and like basically wrote itself. And from there
Sick.
on, I kind of did the rest.
Yeah. And I mean, there you go, folks. We got, let's see, we got Inertia, we got Embers, and we got To Wither Away, which all are music videos. Once I am fully moved, I will like moved it over to Tennessee. I will most likely be doing reactions for that because the way that Mr. Dave here has been describing those videos is very, very intriguing. And I do appreciate you, like being that we passed the hour point so far. I do appreciate you spending the time with us and talking about such an awesome and intriguing record, whether it be the album art, the name of the album, or the depth behind it. Nonetheless, thank you for stopping by and deciding to talk about this with us. We've got 3 tracks remaining, folks. So, after To Wither Away, which is more or less about the unfortunate circumstance that he was in which the other person was just kind of taking chunks of like happiness away from him and just kind of deteriorating his self-image. We got coalescence, which I love that word. I love all these like really really intelligent words. What do we got with going on with coalescence lyrically?
Coalescence is like kind of the last chapter of, I guess, that trilogy, like of that relationship. Coalescence is kind of like a recap on like looking back at the relationship and, you know, recalling all the times that like, you put everything to this relationship and all you wanted was to come together with this person and become one.
Mhm.
And instead you got everything but. It seemed like whenever you try to make this work and make this blossom, the other person is just pulling it back because, you know, like like we discussed in To Wither Away and Epitaph, they aren't over their past traumas and they're putting that onto you, and it's making this relationship harder and harder to blossom and become what you want it to be.
Yes.
So it really is like covering a lot of how you're trying to make this thing grow, but instead she's making it wither. And then the final 2 lines of the song are, still I hear the whispers of your voice inside my brain, and still I feel your fingers crawling underneath my skin.
Right.
And those 2 lines are basically like encapsulating how, you did become one with this person, but not in the way that you imagined,
Yeah.
or not in the way that you intended, where you wanted to come together in a romantic way and become something beautiful, but instead you're now intertwined and left over with the trauma of that past relationship, where you still feel the after effects of that relationship affecting your everyday decisions and actions and how you handle future relationships.
Yeah. And a really cool word choice because I was curious about the definition, just to quote. But for those who don't know, coalescence means the joining or merging of elements to form one master whole. So utilizing that word and plugging it into the situation, we have Dave and the other person. He was trying to make sure that there was a coalescence per se of harmony, that they were joining, they were becoming one, and that something good would come out of it. But more or less, it ended up being like a kind of yucky, toxic, like I don't know, radiated, just mass. And there was still a little bit of hey, I'm sure we could fix this, but overall, the negativity from the other person and their past traumas was overwhelming, and therefore, in whole, it became a toxic mess. So, just for a little wordplay to throw in there and kind of make it seem like provide the impression that I'm participating a little bit more in this session, because got to do that. Like that's really how you build a good interview. But awesome, Awesome. Really like the idea of coalescence and just the fact that you were trying to do your best to make sure that the coalescence itself had a positive reaction, but it didn't end up in the end. And people, that's just how life works sometimes. Sometimes even the people that you are head over heels for are just, it doesn't work out, and that's okay. That just means that there's someone else out there along the way for you to meet, and
Absolutely.
that's just how it works. That's how you write a good story too. You got to have conflict. It can't be freaking Disney princesses and just like happily ever after all the time. But sooner or later, you will find that to
Absolutely.
everybody, including me. Like we got you. But moving on, we have another pretty awesome word for a pretty awesome track, I'm sure. Obsolete. What do we got going on here?
So Obsolete um, kind of goes back into the topics of struggling with religion and then a little bit of like, I guess, philosophy. I use that term very loosely.
Right.
Um, so this kind of takes place like at the point in my life when, I kind of was like free from, religion in a way, and I was kind of taking my own path. But then I was still kind of struggling with the concept of, what happens after death. And there, like that first line of the song is opposing sides be opposing sides begin to harmonize and leave a life in disarray. And that, like, opposing sides, it's like, while you're trying to discover for yourself like what happens, or what your new path is, people are throwing their opinions at you left and right,
Yeah.
and it just starts to throw you for a loop where you're just like, I need to figure this out for myself, or I need to, come to a conclusion myself, or whatever it may be. And you know it also kind of talks about, the discussion of like, I don't care if there's no afterlife. I'm okay with just, my life ending when it does, and I just become one with the earth. And then also later in the song, when the melody starts to pick in, or the melody starts to kick in, that's kind of when I just have like a little bit of an epiphany where I realize that, what's more important, instead of what happens after you die, is what happens, or like what's more important is, you know, the time that you have here on earth.
What you leave behind.
Yes, and leaving a good impact. So instead of dwelling so much on what happens after death, you should be focused on, your time here on earth, and how you're contributing to the world, and like the impact that you're leaving behind for people, and the legacy that you're going to leave behind.
Right.
And to me, that's more important than any afterlife, any what any book will tell you on where you're going. Because, if you just, spend your whole life focusing on where you're going to go afterwards, you kind of get distracted, and pulled away from what's most important. And that's what you do, and how you choose to spend, the time that you do have here on this earth.
Yeah.
And a lot of people can forget that is very important. And it's like, what are you making of the life that you've been given?
Yeah, and that's actually a really interesting thought process because even for me, for like Ossature and stuff, which is more or less a Viking religion, you see it in the Marvel movies, which it's kind of exaggerated and simplified for younger minds to just like, oh, heroes, yeah. But
Yeah.
Valhalla, when you pass away, if you die in battle or whatever, the belief is that you were taken up to Valhalla and you're given an honorable warrior's death. But if you kind of commit suicide, if you do all these other things that like it's like you did what you have to do, but like maybe die in battle or something, or at least that's what they used to think. You would end up going to Helheim, which is not hell. It's more or less like the underworld, and Hela, the goddess of death, she overlooks that. So at least in the religion that I kind of support, like a sports team, like go Vikings.
Yeah.
um Without a doubt, man. It's like I definitely have been thinking a little bit about like what goes on afterwards, if there is anything afterwards, because DMT either way is going to give you one hell of a trip before you go wherever you go, because that is a proven thing. That is scientific fact that when you pass away and when you're born, you release an extensive amount of DMT. And over time, your dreams, they consist of DMT. You guys can look this up right now if you want to after watching this session, and you'll realize that what I'm saying is true. It's the chemical that allows us to have dreams in the first place. And the flashing before your eyes thing, that is the release of the rest of the DMT inside your dormant brain. And flowers release it, plants release it in the wild. It's a very, very universal Terran Earth based thing, but is a very real thing. And I would not be surprised if half the people in the world kind of got brief descriptions of what goes on afterwards from people who were under a lot of DMT release. And they're like, oh my gosh, I just saw Jesus or whatever. But it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, that is very, very interesting, very important. And it's something that we should all be talking about. The impact that you leave here, not what you end up doing next. You know, if you're a piece of shit here, you're probably not going to be able to go into battle and battle frost giants. And that's just speaking more or less for Ossature in the next life. Like, you got to be a decent person if you expect to like go into utopia or paradise or wherever you want to go when you die. And if you want to fade into nothing, still don't be a piece of shit. Because what if like, you pass away, even if you're atheist, and it's just slightly discomforting and you're in that state forever? That would suck, right? So in other words, don't be a piece of shit. Be good to everybody around you. Be good to the planet you're on, and then worry about what goes on after, which kind of correlates with that, really.
Exactly.
So that's really important. Really, it's a very profound mortal conversation to have. So I do appreciate that you allowed us to know about the depth beneath that. That way we can kind of relate it and plug into our own lives, because that's fairly important. And that's what music and art and lyricism, poetry is, people. It's when you're able to intertwine your life and connect with what you're listening to, what you're participating in. It's always fun, at least for me. I don't know about you guys, but last track of this great like deep dive record with, again, such an awesome album cover, awesome people behind it, including Aaron Shiparian, who's a homie of Worm Shepherd, so massive respect to him, massive shout out to him. We got Atlas. This is like the way that Collapse by Design is wrapping up. What do we got going on with Atlas?
So Atlas, the first time I heard it, I knew it was going to be the closer to the record. It just had I hate using this word, but an epic kind of feel. And it definitely had, you know, made its place on the record on its own. It really just had the entire embodiment of a closing track. And I could never picture this song anywhere else on the album. And, you know, lyrically, it really does make for a good ending because, you know, Atlas also, fun fact, was the only song that kept its demo name because all the other demo names were stupid and goofy. And this one was just titled Atlas from its very old demo stages. This actually was written 5 years ago, or at least
Oh wow!
middle to later chunk of the song was actually written about 5 years ago in a program called Tux Guitar.
All right,
And
fun.
when it came time to record, the demo version and fully flesh it out, my guitar player Chris went back to those archives and was like, "Hey man, this song I think is finally going to make it onto an album, and it works so well with the rest of the melodic nature of this album. So I think this could
Right.
be a good addition." And I was like, "Hell yeah!" And so I used the title Atlas to kind of help guide me. Not really intended for a pun there, but it just kind of happened. Uh, the song title Atlas kind of guided me on where I was going to go lyrically with this. And, for most people who I guess don't know, by definition, an atlas is like a series of maps in a sense.
Yes.
And so, and on a map, you're going to see land, you're going to see water. And in the opening line of the song, it says, "I push aside this ocean of time." So there's little like nods towards like, references to what you would see on a map. And the song is about a journey. And
Oh,
it's like taking that journey towards a new
one
out.
second. Sorry. We don't have to edit that, but continue.
So Atlas is essentially a journey of, going from like this negative mindset that has taken over this entire record and trying to reach a new outlook on life and leaving that negativity behind and trying to, find like that self-love and, have this new outlook on life. And, there's other, lyrical notes where it says like through the sands of time, the path in mind is realigned. And it really just, overall is like it's where I was at when writing the song, where it's like after I purged all the toxicity that was like in my heart and in my mind from all these years, I really felt like I was, the person in the song. And I was fully invested and I knew that I was in a better place than I was like, from all those past relationships.
Right.
And, and that's, what I can only hope for people who are out there dealing with heartache and mental struggles and emotional struggles is that they can also, overcome that hurdle and realize that there is a whole new world on the other side once you get out of that negative mindset.
Yeah.
And instead of choosing to hold on to that, just letting it go.
Sick. Awesome. And I mean, that's a great way to wrap up a story like that, just because over the course of the record, digging more personally, it's the same thing for you, like utilizing Atlas and finding your way out. Like sooner or later, you had to learn to let it go and move on and just get into healthier habits and healthier decision making in your life. Which I have no doubt that you had no issues doing that in the first place. But it's very important for the realization process is just moving on from um, all of that negativity and all that toxic environment. So what a great way to wrap up such an awesome record. And I mean, awesome, obviously, second episode for Under the Skin. Such a great honor that it happened to be a record like this, because records like this are what really shape interviews and track by track lyrical analysis. So, Dave, I really, really do appreciate you stopping by and telling us the story behind Collapse by Design, getting as personal with it as you did. And I mean, obviously, putting all the effort that you did in studio into this record. I'm not sure how much of the record you ended up playing on the Angel or Alien tour before you came back, and we had the time to bounce back and forth and figure out the session in the first place. But short words, 2 words. Thank you. Thank you for
And,
stopping by and telling us the story of this record.
hey man, well, thank you for not only having me on here, but showing interest in the band and this record. It really means a lot. And I apologize that we had to reschedule this to another time.
No, you're
Uh,
fine.
but yeah, to answer that other part, I mean, we got to play 6 songs off this record on the Angel Alien tour. We're trying to play mostly new stuff because this is the version of Sentinels that we're trying to get people familiar with, because the past stuff doesn't really resonate with, what we're trying to do and what we're trying to say, I guess, now as a band. So,
Yes, of
you know,
course.
luckily we got to play 6 of the 12 songs. So pretty much half the record, or exactly half the record. So
Right.
it's nice to finally be playing this stuff for people and finally have it out there to the world. And I'm glad that, the overall consensus from people who have heard it so far has been nothing short of positive, and it's really flattering. And I hope that it just continues to grow and reach new people. And I hope that people who listen to this can, you know, go back to this record if they haven't listened to it in a little bit and, look at it in a new light and realize that there's a very personal angle on this album, and
Definitely.
it's not just a bunch of gibberish
Right.
thrown around. So,
Well, hands
everything was.
down. Yes, sir. You can continue.
Oh no, that was it. That was
Okay.
good.
Right. So October 22nd is when Collapse by Design came out, people. On Sharp Tone Records, this is Sentinels. This is Dave, the drummer and primary lyricist behind this record, as well as the backup vocalist on tour. They were just on tour, as we've said over the course of the session. They went on the Angel or Alien tour to help promote the Angel or Alien album that Born of Osiris just released. But this is for Collapse by Design, people. What an amazing record. What an awesome album cover. The merch is actually discounted right now because I was just checking it out, waiting to see if the red hoodie that Dave actually has on right now was still in 2XL, but I missed my shot. That's on me. Beautiful hoodie, beautiful merch, awesome record. I definitely need to give this a couple listens. do my homework a little bit more and enjoy this record for goodness sake. But this was Dave from Sentinels out of New Jersey. And this is their debut album. Go listen to it. Every listen, every stream counts, even after Spotify Wrapped and all that. And yeah, we will be sure to see you guys in the next Under the Skin session. Dave, thank you again, and be sure to have an awesome night.
Hey man, you too. Thank you.
Will do.